Today we have a guest whose story is the definition of transformation. Jacqueline Hurst is one of the UK's leading life coaches, a mindset expert, and the author of the powerful book, How to Do You. But before she became the woman inspiring thousands, she was fighting some of the darkest battles: addiction, anorexia, and self-destruction. Her journey took her from rock bottom to becoming a force of change, helping people break free from limiting beliefs and taking control of their minds. Jacqueline's no-nonsense, straight-talking approach to mindset works, cuts through the fluff and gets to the real stuff, the way that we think, the way that we feel, and how we can shift both to live the lives that we actually want. Today, we are diving into it all, the struggles, the turning points, and the tools that can help you take back control of your own mind. So Jacqueline, welcome to Mind Movers. As I was just describing, the reason why I came across this incredible guest is because I was sent her book and I found it so empowering and actually challenging at times as well, because it allowed me to challenge my own thought processes. I'm a massive self-development junkie, so it was right up my alley. But I'm so excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I always like to start from the beginning, and we know that your journey has been incredibly raw and real. And before we get into the mindset work, can you take us back to the beginning? What was life like before you changed everything?
Gosh, it's always quite a tough question, that one. It reminds me of when I wrote my book, and I'd written everything together, and my publisher said to me, right, now we need a chapter on you. And I was like, don't be silly. Nobody needs that. And he's like, no, we need that because we want to know that A, you know what you're talking about, and B, how you got where you got to give us advice. Why would we care what you have to say? Like, tell us your story. And I always find that part, and I should probably look into this myself of the why, but I always find that part really, I still feel quite touched by the process of the journey for myself. And I also understand that it was all working perfectly, which is it's a big thing I still think about today, how things are working perfectly, whether we think they are at the time or whether we don't. There's always this bigger picture. So my journey started really when I was much, much younger. I looked like on the outside I had this beautiful, wonderful life. And actually behind closed doors, things were very difficult. I had parents that went off to America. From when I was 10 years old, they would go off for months at a time, and we were left pretty much on our own to sort of learn how to, in their words, be independent. And it was a tough experience for me. I had to learn very quickly to always sort of portray I was okay. I never wanted to let anybody down. I was always fine when, they called and everything, when actually behind the scenes, it wasn't that at all. I was being bullied very badly at school. I had no friends. I got into the wrong crowds, and then I got into drugs, alcohol, anorexia, all of those things from a very young age of around 15. So from the age of 15 to 25, my life was a shambles, a total mess, class A's, whatever I could use to take myself away from myself. I got into, crazy situations. I'm very lucky to still be alive. That's a snapshot of that. At 25, I had a moment of deciding that, I tried suicide 3 or 4 times. I'd got to a point where it was like, I can't go any lower, right? Like, there had to be something different. And I was sort of lucky. I got given this sort of gift of desperation, we call it. And it was a total and utter breakdown. And from that space, every day from that space, I've changed and grown and, turned my life around. Got clean, got sober, got well with my food and my body image and my eating disorders, got through all of my addictions. And I'm coming to my 22nd year clean, actually. Congrats. Now. Thank you. So yeah, through that process, all of that, that was how it all started, basically. But through that process, it's literally person A and person B today.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Do you think, and I'm also very mindful not to blame parents, because I think that our parents did the best that they could with the knowledge that they had at the time. But with emerging research and psychiatrists really studying attachment and attachment styles, I think the presence of parents at pivotal growth points is really important to our development. Do you think in some way, without attaching blame to your parents, that that sense of abandonment perhaps triggered you to make some of the decisions that you did?
I definitely think that's a really great topic, and I'm really glad you brought that up. We are, for starting off with, we're in a society at the moment where, your parents are toxic, don't speak to them, blah, blah. We're in a really interesting space with all of that. For me personally, I come from a space of it's all happening how it's meant to be happening. And that's ultimately, if they knew better, they would do better. And so they didn't know better. No. So one can either stand around and hold anger and frustration and hatred and, pain towards them, or you can do your work, go into coaching, understand it, unravel it, and have complete peace around that space. So it's a really important thing to say. So for me, there is no blame at all around my parents. They absolutely did the best they could with what they had, which isn't what I've got and isn't what many people have got. But that generation also was very, very different. Yeah. And look what they had learned from, right? And it goes backwards and backwards. So I would start off with that conversation. I think that childhood development is a really important topic of conversation. And I also think that parents, can also overgive to their children, where they can suffocate their children, and that can cause problems. So there's a million things that could cause somebody to go the route I went through. And two, we could say, yes, it was abandonment and it was, a failure of this part and that part. But that was my journey and that was how it was meant to be. And I don't think that parenting comes with a handbook, and I think parents tried the best they can with what they've got. Ideally, my personal opinion is, if you have kids, bring your kids up, be available, love them. They don't have to have things all the time. They just have to know that they're loved and that there's someone there that they can talk to. That's a really important thing to do if you're going to have kids. But
have you got kids?
I haven't got kids. I couldn't have children. I got told that very young, in my 20s. I actually couldn't have kids. And
was that because of any medical implications of what your body had been through, or was that just because...
I don't know if the medical implications were part of me not having kids. I just got told I couldn't have them. It was going to be basically impossible. And again, it was another experience for me. And it's not actually something that I talk about. So that's, not that I've got anything to hide, but for me, that was sort of, I was told, this is how it is. Now, I'm a super positive thinker. So I always believed, if I really wanted to have kids, there would be ways around that, right? There's adoption, et cetera, et cetera. So my journey and my path didn't take me down that route, but I do believe that because I didn't have children, I had this space to grow my business, and I've worked with over 9,000 clients now, and that has been so enlightening for me, and I have really been able to give a lot, through that process. So I feel very grateful for that. And I'm never someone who lives in if this is the fact and this is what it is, I've got to find ways to think about that to make myself feel all right about it. I'm never going to be someone who sits in a victim mentality of this is terrible, my life's over. There's a process to that, but you can't stay in that forever.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do, but there's a few things that I want to unpack. First of all, have either one of you seen Adolescence?
Not yet.
No, I heard no.
It is a masterpiece. I really recommend, especially because you're in the space of coaching and so forth, and there's so much psychology and psychotherapy around it. I won't spoil it for you, but essentially it's about a young boy that gets accused of stabbing a young girl to death. And when you hear the producers and the writers, they said that, the reason they were inspired to write this story is because of what is going on in London, which is very prevalent now. You've got these young boys attacking young girls. And it's a lower class family up north, and, a loving kind of family from Liverpool. And they cannot work out how their son turned out like this. And it's so, so powerful in so many senses. But talking about the parenthood side, you would say that looking at them, fine, they're not the most well-off family, but they were very emotionally available, I think, to the child. And obviously when the child is going through the justice and legal side of things, you see an episode where the parents are like, I could have done better. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I didn't intervene. And, one of the rises of violence and misogyny in young boys is because of this manosphere and this toxic masculinity narrative and how young boys are being let down. It's absolutely fascinating. It's really, really well done. But my point is, it was interesting to see because, as you said, people find it really easy to blame parents. And even in the show, you could see that the parents were being tormented by the public because they were like, your son did this, it's your fault, it's the parenting and so forth. But it's really, I think people really just do the best that they can with the knowledge they have.
100%.
And I think it's actually extremely toxic that we blame parents for children.
Leave blame out of it. I mean, the reason why I asked whether you've got kids or not is that some of your clients, let's say, who have got kids, do people sometimes overcompensate for what the deficit that they think their parents gave?
100%. In fact, I was having a conversation like this with my sister recently. She has 2 children. And, she is the opposite of what we got brought up with. She is fully 180% available for her children. And, and that's lovely in one way.
You're saying sometimes too much.
And it could possibly be too much in another way. So she's having to learn how to balance that. But again, you could be the most loving, wonderful, amazing parent doing everything you possibly could. And your kids still might blame you for things. But you never this. And but this was too much. And so, this is why one has to learn how to step into, which is what I teach clients, your own emotional adulthood. You got to unpack. Can I swear? Because I'm just holding it back. But you got to unpack your shit, right? Because if you spend your life blaming, my mum did this and my dad did that and my ex-husband did this and my friend did that, like, you're never going to grow and you're never going to take responsibility for yourself. And ultimately, you're never going to be happy or at peace.
Yeah, I really agree with that, because on the outside, like, my parents are amazing. Payman's had the pleasure of meeting them. They're extremely emotionally available and kind, and with that, they couldn't be totally present with the schooling and stuff because they were immigrants that were working like 3 jobs at once to keep us in a private school, quite frankly. And some people might be like, you had a nanny, because we had our nanny from the Middle East. I'm like, a nanny really didn't affect me. Like, there was so much judgment that I had a nanny, but that was the only way they could do it to make it work for my system. However, what I would say is that I suffer with crippling rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So I cannot.
Sorry, wait, what? What is
rejection
this?
sensitivity dysphoria? So I was a late diagnosed ADHD person by my therapist. And so, like, I take rejection so badly, this, like, beyond. Like, someone could make a passing comment and I will internalize it and hate myself and go into this, like,
I'm going to get
crisis.
really controversial with you here.
Yeah.
So one has to be really careful with labels, okay? Just putting it on the table here. When I was going through getting clean and getting sober and even the hormonal issues, all of these things that I've had, people have always wanted to slap labels on me. I mean, I could give you a list of 17 labels. People in white coats told me, I don't mean literally white coats, but I mean doctors here and specialists there, right?
They become self-fulfilling, don't they, in a way? Once you give yourself a label, you kind of live out.
You live up to it, right? Yeah. So this rejection thing, I would at some point love to, clearly not on a podcast, but I would love to unpack that with you, because I'm going to say to you, I'm not sure I agree with that. And I think that many people suffer with rejection, and rejection is a mind-made thing.
I think the thing is like, look, I mean, Payman's known me for a number of years now.
She's certainly very, very sensitive to, unexpectedly sensitive.
As in, like, I can go, someone will say something, said something to me on Sunday, a friend, and she didn't know what she said had incredibly hurt me. And I just went into the shower afterwards and I was like sobbing for like an hour and a half.
So mindset management, and again, this is really hard just to like unpack this in one podcast, because this is work that I do with my clients and it's taken over like a series of sessions. But I'm just going to drop this down here and you can disagree and it's cool. I will teach my clients that when people say things or do things or act in certain ways or whatever, actually how you think about that is what matters. Yeah. Because we can't control what that person said. How you're interpreting that in your brain is what hurt you, not what she said.
Totally. But that gets me on to the point that I was saying about my parents, is that because of the certain things that my parents have brought me up thinking, and on the outset it's like extremely loving, there is this kind of confirmation bias that I've created in my head that's like, this person has said that, and the way that I'm receiving the information, internalizing it, is because of my kind of core belief of what I've been brought up with. Right. So for example, there has been this aspect of, I don't want to say conditional love, but kind of, is like, again, like immigrant mentality. Like, the more you achieve, the better that you are, the more you're loved, okay? So that always has been like projected into every aspect of my life. So when I hear someone say something negative, I'm like, they essentially are saying, I am not good enough, because that is the way.
Right, that's all how you're interpreting
everything. And I understand that. I have total awareness around that.
Yeah.
And obviously it's easier said than done. Whilst I've done all the work and I can be like, this is the way, like, and that's why I've stopped like reacting when they say something, but sometimes it internally hurts. You know, I'm human.
It's like sometimes thinking about it is one thing, but feeling it is a whole other thing.
Correct. And I think that I can be like, the way that I'm processing this information may not be the way Jacqueline or Payman is processing the information. Because
you're planning kids soon, right?
Yeah.
So do you reckon you're going to overcompensate for that?
You can process that differently.
Yeah.
So I know you're like, I've done all the work on it, but the thing is to a point, because if you had done some other work on it, right, you will hear what this person says
and be okay with it.
And be totally okay.
Yeah. I'd love to get that, but we'll book a session after
you
the
can.
podcast.
The whole reason I want to say that is not to be contentious, but to say one doesn't have to live like that. Just because we have been programmed that way, right? I got brought up believing I had zero worth, right? If I was valuable, why have you left? Okay. That was my internal thing, right?
Same.
Total, I must not be worth shit.
Yeah.
Right. I don't believe that state at all. So if someone says something to me or does something or whatever, I don't internalize that the way I would have done as a kid. And that work takes work, right? But is 100% possible to change. So I, as you can tell, as straight talking as you said, no nonsense. I wouldn't want, if you were my client, I wouldn't want you holding on to that stuff and telling yourself like, oh, I'm not saying that you are, but like, oh, but this is what happened to me and this is how I process it and that's it. Because it isn't it. You can change that. And that is how you make your life fucking amazing.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
I got it.
Jacqueline, do you think you need to have gone through suffering and pain in order to be a really like successful coach?
I think my authenticity, people know when I work with them that I'm not talking from I've read a book and I'm a life coach space. Like, been there, seen it, done it, got the t-shirt. So I would believe that that's a huge part of my success. It's really, really authentic.
Pay, we had this chat because I had my life coach come on and I said, I worked with a life coach for a year, someone that I went to university with. And one of the big reasons that I chose him is because he'd been through it, because he'd been through the depths of hell. Sorry, I'm going to be blunt. Why am I going to choose someone that has not been through? The whole point is, I'm like, you went through that, you came out of it. I'm going to learn from you.
Yeah, but
and that's it.
Like if I want to,
this is where we disagree.
If I want a full mouth reconstruction, I don't have to come to a dentist who's had a full mouth reconstruction themselves. Like,
different
listen, I understand how it's helped your story and just sort of the center of your authenticity and maybe call it marketing, whatever you want. But my question is, do you believe that someone who hasn't been through it can't be as effective?
I can only talk from my personal experience.
But in the industry,
and I know that when I was looking for help back in the day,
you couldn't find.
I was an addict. I had a really clever fucking brain, right? I could run rings around people that had not experienced or done anything I'd done. And that wasn't, I'm not saying that's a good thing. It was not a good thing. But I had to go and learn it myself to get better. So do I believe that? Yes. Is my industry unregulated? Yes. Can anybody read a book and go, I've left my job in finance and I'm going to be a life coach? Great. And they might be amazing at marketing and they might have 80 billion followers on Instagram and people go, that person must be an amazing life coach. I should go and buy their stuff. And what is their life experience? And so, yes, the answer to your question is yes. I do believe people in my industry have to have lived a life to know how to help people. As a coach, I'm not giving people necessarily advice on what they should do. I don't know what they should do. What I do is I teach people how to think, and then they work out for themselves what they should do.
For instance, if someone had the opposite problem that you had, so you're saying you had low self-esteem. Let's say someone's the opposite, like too confident, overconfident, not self-aware.
Yeah.
Can you help that person since you haven't been in that position?
100%. If they want help.
That's the most important thing. Also, the key thing that she said here was experience. You just said, if I want a full mouth rehabilitation and you've not had one. Well, I'm sorry, if someone had just come out of dental school and treated one patient, I'm not going to go to them for full mouth rehab. I'd rather go to someone with 10 years experience.
I get that.
Experience is the key thing.
It's the having been through it yourself question.
Having been through it yourself. But yes, I think especially in my industry, I am a believer of someone has to.
My ex-boyfriend was a charlatan and quit his job to become a life coach and was a narcissist narcissist and the most awful human being. It was a joke, and he became a life coach. So yes, I do think it is unregulated and can be dangerous, but I do also think there's a place for it. And I do think some of the coaches that I've worked with over the years have been better than therapists, dare I say. And also, but you've really got to do your due diligence. And the danger is when you're vulnerable, you want help. So you don't necessarily do your due diligence.
Definitely.
And that's the day, because I got myself.
I know, look, it's super unfair to ask this, yeah, but
No, please go ahead. I'm ready for
no,
it.
because, you know, it takes hours and hours of talking to people. But in that situation where you've got a Rhona saying, I'm never good enough, and you want to switch that, what are 3 top tips that people who feel like that should bear in mind? Like,
So first of all, it's not a feeling, it's a thought, right? We don't feel it, we think it.
Yeah.
And you are in control of your head and your thinking,
Yeah.
right? So you have got choices as to how you think. That's really important to understand. So the first thing is consciousness, right? Become conscious of what you're thinking, and do that. You know, like really become aware. What is going on in my head? Because most of the time we walk around totally unconscious and unaware, and you've just got this cycle of thoughts going through your brain like all the time. So my first tip is get conscious and become aware of what you're actually thinking. And it's likely you're going to find that you are really unkind to yourself. You're really negative to yourself. It's something you're never, ever, ever going to say to your friend, ever. Why? Because fucking mean and rude. So that's important to think about. If I'm not going to say it to them, why is it all right that I say it to me, right? So that's also important to do. And then I would ask you to look at where the thought comes from and what your life might look like if you changed it. That's really powerful. Like, what happens if I look at that and think I can switch it around and think, actually, I am of value? Even if it's just to, you know, my kids or my husband, I'm of value, right? That's already going to start to change things.
so now you have that insight. Are there tactics as well?
What do you mean tactics?
I don't know.
Tools. He's saying like tools, like in that moment.
Like maybe do you teach her, you know, in that moment, whatever it is.
I'm a big believer of writing things down. I love pen
I journal
and paper.
every day.
Yeah, and I think
Love it. I love journaling. It's the most powerful thing for me.
Do you go back in your journal and look what you wrote
I've been
6 months ago?
journaling since I was 11 years old, and I have all of them in a cupboard.
When you look at what you were writing 6 months ago, do you sometimes laugh at how silly you were being or something?
No, because for me it was never silly, and sometimes
But not journaling, like what you were thinking. What you were thinking
I don't
was
ever
incorrect
look at
6
myself, because
months
I
ago.
understand that was what was important to me at that time. And the whole point, I mean, some people have the train of thought that like you should write things down and then not look at it or burn it or whatever. I actually don't mind looking back at stuff, and I'm like, oh, that was interesting, because
What
I'd
do you
forgotten.
see? What patterns do you see when you look back at it? Like,
There is this like pattern of desperation and wanting to kind of, I mean, I don't know, like there's lots of different things. Like sometimes it's, you know, I love to write when I travel, so it might also be about what I've done or the things that, you know, we've experienced. There's sometimes gratitude in there, and I find that that's really powerful in the day. And the gratitude could be like, just had the most amazing oat milk flat white and it tasted amazing, you know, and I'm really grateful I'm writing here amongst the pyramids. Do you know what I mean? So there's things like that which I find is really great, and I do think there is power in gratitude, and gratitude isn't this constant thing of like, my life is amazing, be grateful, there are people less privileged. Like I really do think it's being like looking around and being like, what am I appreciating? It could be even like being in a clean and quiet house this morning. Do you see what I mean? It just, so yeah, for me that's it. And sometimes it is just a stream of consciousness being like, I'm waking up feeling anxious, I don't know what's going on, it might not even make sense, just like stream of consciousness. It's fine, but it's all out in the morning, and then I'm like, okay, great. So I do agree that writing really
when
helps.
you say write, is the benefit both the getting it out of your head and the review?
I mean, with the people that I
review
work
later?
with, it's not just, journaling is really important. It's not just journaling. It's
Oh,
about understanding tools and techniques to actually learn how to change your brain. How does it work, right? Like, how do you change your minds? And get into a space of, it's not positive thinking, right? Because that to me is, I love the idea of it, just that never worked for me. Like I could never stand in front of a mirror and go, I feel really confident today. Like, no,
same.
right? It just wasn't going to work. So there's tools and techniques to teach you how to get there, to be able to have an end result of being looking in a mirror and going, yeah, I've fucking got this, bring it on, right? That's great. And so there are ways to do that, and that requires a pen and a paper, you know, and I think there's something special about getting it from your head, you know, clearly on paper and working it through. It's annoying for people because we're in the day and age of everything's fast, but actually when you slow it down, it's really helpful. Yeah.
Have you noticed that how many years have you been doing this?
pretty much since I got clean. I got clean at
20
I got clean in 2003.
So have you noticed that the problems have changed a lot since mobile phones?
Yeah, drastically.
Like it's definitely the cause of a bunch of pain.
Yeah,
Right?
it's we are totally disconnected from each other. You know, it's really, the thing I hate the most is when I walk past like a family at a restaurant of like two kids, you know what I'm going to say, and parents, and they're all on the phone, and it's, to me, that's really upsetting. And I'm a real believer of, you know, being very careful with your tech and having controlling your tech rather than letting it control you.
Yeah, I love
really
that.
important.
And I saw a huge difference. And my friend that I was just telling you about in Dubai, I mean, she sounds a little bit like your sister. I think she came from a difficult, broken home, and as a result gives like 300% to her kids. And she definitely made the choice. I think at one point she wanted to be a career woman, and then she made the choice of being like, no, I'm going to really dedicate, you know, my life to basically my kids' upbringing. And now she's thinking about transitioning back into work. But anyway, when I went to go see her, her kids, they were so amazing. And I rarely say that because I'm not someone that's super maternal or broody or anything like that. But I was like, they were such a pleasure to be around. And my husband and I were like, oh my God, they are so intelligent, so inquisitive, so present. And I was like, Anna, what have you done? And you know, she said to me, she was like, and I noticed it. No iPads and no mobile phones. And it was
At all?
fast. It was at all. They
How
have
old
to
are they?
use the 8 and 6.
All right, that's... You
8 and 6, right?
But you're right, there's plenty of 2-year-olds with iPads. Isn't there?
8 and 6. And she said to me something similar. She goes, you know, I realise if you give a child something that's less intelligent than them, like a piece of paper or a ball, they'll be creative and they'll use their brains on how to make it interesting. If you give them something like technology, which is smarter than them, their brains will start to slow down. And I really saw that because they were constantly being creative around the house. And you could see that there was like this little distraction. They wanted to be present. They wanted to be outside. There is no judgment because I do believe, like, again, some parents, that's what they use as a coping tool. But I really felt the difference when I saw the way her kids were interacting.
Was it Steve Jobs that said I would never give my kids an
Yeah.
iPhone? Okay,
Yeah.
so like, why have we not listened to that?
Yeah.
Like, this is
Yeah.
seriously, like, I always say, people tell you what you want to know.
Yeah.
You just got to listen, right? So if he's saying that,
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I know that we digressed a lot into the mindset stuff already, but for you, kind of like late 20s or sort of early 20s, like what would your typical day have looked like back then?
we're talking about when I was in my
And then your
the height of my
addiction, yeah.
addiction. You know, it was a very dark time, and it still makes me feel quite emotional when I think about it, for the girl that I was then. And I was living, literally, in some ways I was functioning, in other ways I really wasn't. But I would tell you that most of my time was spent behind closed doors, closed curtains, and on my own, using drugs. I did have a job and I could function on that. But a lot of the time it was literally, I was completely isolated.
What was your job?
I was working as a PA, and you know, I was, you know, doing cocaine in the toilets most of the time, and you know, it was crazy. And then in the evenings, I would go home and smoke a load of dope, and you know, shut myself off from the world, and you know, or it was, you know, if I was in the mood to actually go out and do something, it would be crazy shit that, you know, I would go out and come back 3 days later. And it was a wild time. And, you know, as I keep saying, I'm really lucky to say, you know, I'd wake up in different countries sometimes and think, how the fuck did I get here?
Did you have any real friends at the time?
No.
None. Yeah.
No, I didn't.
I think that's really...
It's probably very hard to be friendly with someone like me back then. It was probably impossible, actually, to do that.
So what was the day that was the turning point?
So the day that was the turning point was I was living in a squat. I had nothing, no money to my name.
And not in touch with your family at this point?
Wasn't in touch with my family. And my mum had found out, like, that I was down the road and knocked on the door and came in and said, you know, you're my daughter and I love you, and... are you depressed? Like, what's going on? And I don't know why in that moment, you know, I think I'd really hit the floor at this point. And I just thought, I need to say to someone the truth. And I just looked at her and said, I'm a drug addict and I need help. And she took me to my first meeting. She said, what do? I said, I think you go to a meeting. I've heard of meetings. And that was the day I got clean, 27th of August, 2003.
Do you still go to the meetings?
No, I went for about 6 years. It saved my life, wholeheartedly saved my life.
So you believe in the AA program?
I do 100% believe in the AA program, the Narcotics Anonymous program. It was different back then. I wholeheartedly believe in it. I 100% became who I am from that space. Without that, I wouldn't be here. Like, I owe it my life. I really do. And it is a bridge to normal living. And like I was saying earlier about labels, I don't want to be labelled anything. I want to cross the bridge to normal living. I don't want to sit in that space. And I have a very controversial view of addiction, which is different from those in the rooms now. I do sometimes pop into meetings. I did go back last year because my father passed away, and that was an incredibly difficult time. And it was the only time as I say, I'm coming up 22 years in August. It was the only time in 22 years I had actually contemplated it again, which was a very frightening space to be in. And I was grateful to go to a meeting, or two. But I think it's a really powerful, powerful program.
Isn't it rare that people, the first time they go to a meeting, stop using drugs?
Yes.
I mean, are you the kind of person who's like all in on?
I'm in the 4%.
All in on the drugs in the first place.
I'm in the 4% of people that get clean and stay clean. 4%.
Yeah.
So is that in your character that you go all into stuff? Like,
I do very much go all in, but I also believe that it was I was broken. It was a gift of desperation. If you'd have said to me at that point, run down Oxford Street stark naked and this will get you clean, I would have done it.
But but I do think it is a type of person, because I had a friend that was an addict and is an addict, was open about it, very open about it, but would think that he could control his ability to get clean because he'd go through lapses. So he'd be clean for 2 months, 3 months, then relapse. And the behaviour that I observed became too much. And the thing is, it wasn't because I didn't want to support him through the process. It's just that he didn't really show signs of ever wanting to get clean. And, this is the thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, he then had a friend that tried to gave him an ultimatum, because all his relationships broke down in his life and have continued to break down still till this day. And I had reached a point, where I was like, money had been taken away. There was too much at this point. I was like, I've had enough, 3 years of this friendship. I was just like, I can't do anymore, because if you don't want to help yourself, no one else can help you. So someone else came into his life and said, listen, because he'd found out he'd been taking drugs, and he said, you have to go. He went to one meeting, half-assed online, and then that was it, and then just keeps relapsing. So I do think it's about that commitment. We had an amazing, inspirational ex-addict on the podcast as well, Hunter Michael Shepherd, who also runs a huge program in the US, and he was addicted, I think, since the age of 12, and really, really hardcore, reached rock bottom like you, has been clean ever since, helps a lot of young people.
Your friend hasn't reached rock bottom yet.
But
he has reached rock bottom. He has. That's the crazy thing.
He wouldn't have done. And I think that we don't know when it's our time to reach rock bottom. And I think addiction is a terribly sad thing to do. And, addicts get a really bad rap. They get a really bad rap because they do things that aren't really who they are, because they're ill. And, until you hit a space where you are willing to rip yourself apart, really willing to rip yourself apart, stare at all of your defects, all of your shortcomings, look at your part in things, all these things that you really have to do, rip apart your ego, get really humble, learn to say sorry, right? Until you are in a space in your life, which they call it the gift of desperation for a reason, then there isn't going to be any change. And so the problem is, if only we could magic something that could make people at that point, we'd be multi-gazillionaires. But people either get that or they don't. And it's also not their fault.
Totally. Well, that brings me on to my next point, because obviously I've been obsessed with the work of Dr. Gabor Mate for years. And I read In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which talks about a lot of the patients that he was seeing. And that was the first time that I viewed addiction in a completely different way. Because the way that he, I don't know if you agree or disagree with it, but at the end of the day, he totally creates a sense of understanding and empathy for addicts, because he's like, we are treating this completely in the wrong. We're punishing them, we're blaming them, we're stigmatizing them. And I was like, okay, like this is starting to make sense to me.
It's really important. It's really listening. I remember when I was married and I was engaged to my ex-husband, and someone at a drinks party said to him in front of me, why would you want to marry a girl like that was an addict? And this guy was supposedly, you know, had gone to public school and was supposedly intelligent. And I remember looking at a guy like that thinking, I feel sad for him that he still sits in the space of stigmatizing people that have got addiction.
Agreed.
You know?
Agreed.
It was, you know, people just need education on that.
And actually, I think more and more the society that we're living in, regardless of the fact that, you know, we're able to function because we have food and all the things that, you know, our great grandparents and everything didn't have. We're living in a really difficult time, and it's become,
really tough.
it's you want to escape the reality.
Yeah.
I empathize with so many people. I mean, I struggle. I'm actually teetotal, been teetotal my whole life because I knew I had an addictive personality really weirdly from a young age. And I was like, I'm not going to drink. It was like this weird thing. Like, and everyone's like, oh, did you used to drink? I'm like, never drank, never touched a cigarette, never would touch a vape. Do you know what I mean? Anything like that, because I know the way that my brain works. And I'm really glad, because also I self-soothe in other ways. Like I self-soothe with like validation, for example, posting, social media, all that kind of thing. And
I love that you can say that and be so clear about what you know that you're doing.
Yeah.
A lot of people do these things and they have zero awareness of why.
Yeah.
So it's really powerful that you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Really.
but you know, if she goes to a retreat and they give her mushroom tea, she'll have that.
Listen, no. He's like,
Not getting involved in this.
No. That number one, that's not true. Again, the plant medicine space is something. It's true. Like the plant medicine space is something, again, through Dr. Gabor Mate, that I'm interested in. It's not to say I wanted to explore ayahuasca once, for example, in South America with I didn't do it in the end for whatever reason. But that is a space that I'm interested in. It's not. I don't have any interest in like going and getting high. And when you actually understand how these medicines work, it's not about going and getting high. You know, it is. I'm very precious about this thing, you know, because I do think that when done with the right intention, with the right people in the right space, it can. And I've seen some people change their lives through that. Not me.
Yeah, I'm all for it, man.
I know, but you wanted to get it high. But I don't think ayahuasca will. After a huge vomiting session, you might be saying otherwise.
What's your typical client like? Are they like...
I wish I could tell you I have a typical one. I spend a lot of time signing NDAs, which is interesting. So that's pretty much my typical client. And
mostly Americans or UK based or both?
Everywhere.
Okay, fine.
Like everywhere. And and you know, but it doesn't have to be that level. You know, there can also be people that come in and say, you know, I work on reception and I really need to get some help, and that's amazing too. Like my door's open to everybody, as long as you want to do the work.
Sort of mentoring.
One-on-one. I work with couples as well, but mainly one-on-one, and it's all done on Zoom because I'm all over. You know, some days I'm here and some days I'm there and blah blah blah. But
typically what, once a week or once a month?
Yeah, usually I like to do a set of sessions with people. So it can be 4 sessions or 8 sessions. But I'm not in the business of taking your money. I'm in the business of you coming in, dealing with your shit, learning how to do it, and then off you go.
So do you make it accessible? I know that's a strange question because obviously, look, you know, as people that are interested in health and mental care, you know, everyone suffers from it, right? And, you know, I love dentistry, I love my job, I can really change the lives of people, but I also know that I'm actually not accessible to a lot of people because of my fees, because of the kind of work that I provide. Which, you know, sometimes can be a little bit of like a mental challenge for me, and I get that, and sometimes I'm confronted with that by other people. Would you say that you are accessible to the lay person?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, even if somebody just wants a one-off session, there's like a 45-minute session you can take with me if that's what you want to do.
So you've also said that our thoughts create our feelings, right? That's something that you've mentioned a few times. But sometimes emotions hit before we even know what we're thinking, which is what I said to you, the shower situation, right? Yes. She said something, it hit me. We'll have a private session on this. It hit me to the core that at that moment I was like this. I couldn't even rationalize it. It was almost like, it felt like this, right? I'm not going into it. No.
What she said?
How do we catch them in time?
Okay. So I like it. I like the question. I'll tell you why. When you're feeling that feeling, it's like a little alarm clock is how you need to think about it. Like, and a little alarm's going off is, oh, I'm feeling this feeling.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, most people just sit in that space and go, oh my God, I'm anxious, right? But no, to do your work, you have to say, right, I'm feeling anxious. Yes. What am I thinking that's making me feel that way? What's going on in my head that's making me feel that way? When you can unpack that, right, I'm thinking, she said that because she doesn't like me, for example. We then want to say, well, first of all, is that true? Is that a fact? Do we know that to be a fact? Because we don't know what other people are thinking or what they're, that's all our assumptions and all our opinions and all our thoughts. So you unpack the thinking around that, and then you work each thought to, in turn, change how you feel. Mm-hmm. And that's your process. Right? Which takes work to learn how to do, but ultimately that's what we do.
Can you give an example? Okay, I'm going to just make up something. Okay, so say a girl says to her girlfriend, I think she looked really fat about someone in her group. I don't know why she wears jeans like that.
Yeah.
It really doesn't suit her. She's got really big hips and a really big bum. Let's just say that happens. Mm-hmm. And then the friend gets triggered because she's thinking, well, I'm not actually much different in size to this girl, so she must think that about me.
Right.
So unpack that.
So
she's
the
triggered.
Question?
She's really upset because you were saying,
what should she do to
what should
not
she
be
do
hurt
in that
by
moment? Okay, so there's a dialogue.
First of all, I would say stop making it about you.
Yeah.
Whoever you are, right? Number one, we take everything about us, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, they're going to think this, and then, right? We're not that interesting to other people.
Yeah.
We're just not.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would say is it's not about you, right? Stop making it about you. It's about the person that said that thing.
Fine.
Then I would say, write down all your thoughts about that, right? She must think that I'm fat, or she must think that I look awful every time I go out, or she must think da-da-da-da-da, right? And then I would challenge every single one of those thoughts. I would literally go thought by thought, right? So she must think I look awful too, right? So I would say to you, really, like, how do you know that? And you're going to come up with 15 million thoughts, and I'm going to say, but how do you know? Mm-hmm. And the answer to that is you're never going to know.
Of course.
Right. So when you start to unpack this, you start to literally break it down. And that's how you then change how you feel.
It sounds a bit logical, though, yeah? And these reactions that she's having sound a bit illogical.
Her reactions are, let's change the word illogical to unconscious.
Yeah.
So her reactions are from an unconscious space.
I would describe it as fight or flight. When I personally get in that zone, I would say that I cannot rationalise it in that moment.
In that moment. And so what you have to do is do the work so that you become aware of when you're thinking. It's a process, right? First, you have to become aware. That can take a week or two. Then you have to say, oh, this is the thought I'm thinking, right? How can I think about this differently? Which can take a week or two. And then the third time, then like week 3 or week 4, when people say those things, it doesn't hit like that anymore.
I mean, the space between stimulus and response, yeah, you have explored that.
But it's what you do with that
idea that you don't. The stimulus and response don't necessarily have to be the same thing.
And they will be immediate when you have an unmanaged mind, and they will be way different once you've managed it. I always say it's like a puppy dog. Your mind is like a puppy, and it comes like when it's unmanaged, which most people's are. Okay, it's not our fault. We aren't taught this stuff at school. I wish we were, right? But ultimately, it's a puppy dog. I want to go here. I want to sniff that. I want to go there. I want to go here. I want to go this. Right? Puppies are like la crazy. When you manage your mind, you're teaching the dog sit, stay, come. Mm-hmm. It learns and it knows what to do. And that's what we're doing with our brains. And your brain is so fucking powerful. It is literally the driver of your whole machine.
I mean, look, I really, really believe in, like, one observation that I'll make is that with you, everything that you have achieved is also because of the power of your mind and because you really believed and wanted those things. Yesterday, I was on a podcast and they were asking me, like, you were one of the first dentists to be on social media. How did you get there? And I was like, because I really believed in social media as this tool. No one else was doing it in dentistry because no one believed dentists would be interesting on social media. I wholeheartedly believed it. Therefore, that belief led me to where I am today. And even now, when things don't go my way of certain things, I do take a lot of accountability, sometimes a bit too much, because I really blame myself. It's your fault. You didn't think about it hard enough. You know, I'm like, you could have manifested and controlled every aspect. It's really hard in relationships, because that's the one part that I realised.
Yeah, relationships.
You can't control the other person.
100%.
You can't control the other person.
But also, you know, yes, that is exactly my brain in it. But I don't want to give off the impression here, or your listeners to think like, you know, it's all, you know, I was always that way. I wasn't. I was an addict with nothing, at lying on the floor, you know, fucked.
Yeah.
But I'm not that person today because of the power of my mind, because I know how to use it, because I know how to feed it, because I know how to look after it, because I know how to think properly. So that should be empowering for people to say, well, if she can go from there to there just by using the power of her brain, I can do these things too. Like, I'm not special and different.
Yeah.
I'm
Jacqueline,
not.
what are you struggling with?
How long have you got? No, I'm just kidding. What do I struggle with? What do I struggle with? That's a really good question.
This week?
What did I struggle with this week?
You said to me being in London as well.
My mum had a small operation this week, and I often feel overly responsible. You know, my dad passed away last year, and I'm learning the balance of like how to look after her, and also not, you know, I can't mummy her. She's an adult, she's 75. But my parents had a marriage where they were together for like 52 years. And my dad did everything for my mum. And my mum is 75. And, you know, I said to her the other day, I was like, just print that email, Mum, just print it. And she said to me, which really hurt my heart, how do I do that? And I suddenly thought, okay, you know, so that balance is a really fine balance. And I would say, and I don't want to use the word struggle, because I don't think that's a struggle, but that's the thing that's on my mind. And struggling is not a comfortable place for anybody to be in. And again, when we get our minds right, we don't struggle. It doesn't mean I'm not like this person is like, everything's, you know, sorted out, because life throws shit at us, especially me, all day long. There's shit coming my way, right? All day long, there's shit coming my way, especially me. I'm joking, but you know what I mean? Like, we've all got shit. It's how we handle it in our heads. And I'm really in tune with myself. So if something doesn't sit properly, I'll talk to my friends about it that are also emotionally intelligent. I have great support around me. I will take it to my coach, you know, and have a conversation with him about, like, I'm a real believer of like, this is a game that we're playing, this game of life, and we're always learning. You know, in fact, the more I learn, the less I know, like, for sure.
What I really loved at the beginning of the conversation as well is this like kind of notion of divine timing that you were saying.
Definitely.
To kind of believe that things are happening for you, not against you. I think that that's quite beautiful, and that's definitely been a mindset shift for me. And what I've been like, there are so many things that I've tried to control, but when I've actually lost them or it's gone wrong, I'm like, oh my God, that was actually so good that happened, you know, like, as in, like, I'm really glad that's no longer in my life, those people or this company or this patient or whatever it is. And I'm like, I tried to really control the whole outcome of that situation because I was just so avoidant of the pain. And then when it happened, it was awful when it happened. I really grieve situations. And then like a year on, I'm like, however, I'm not bitter about it at all. I'm like, it happened for a reason, and I'm kind of glad it's no longer in my life, you know, and that's that.
It's funny, isn't it? Because the more you control, the less control you've got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you believe, because I think the one thing that I struggle with, because I'm a massive, it's almost like a contradiction, because I'm a massive believer in like your mind and manifesting to a degree, not the toxic positivity type of manifesting, but like you said, like you somewhere in your head were like, I'm going to provide something to people to help people, like how you ended up as a coach, etc. So it's really important that your little actions every day allow things to happen. But in a way that's control, if that makes sense, because you put out your intention of what you want. And I think there's almost like this fine balance of not trying to grip onto it too tightly, but like knowing what you want and also at the same time letting things be and happen the way they're meant to happen. Does that make sense?
It does. I had this great teacher, and she said something which I hope will help you. I know it definitely helped me. And she said, like, with things like that, what you have to do is imagine that you're like buying that thing on Amazon, right? Once you've bought it and paid for it, it's on its way.
Yeah.
And then you release it.
Yeah.
And I love that, because it's like, you have to, you know, you've got to put the work in, and then you've got to release it, right? Like, you can't be spending your life trying to control the minutiae of everything and everyone around you. Like, it's just, you know, control is an illusion. It's such an illusion.
So A question that I've got to ask you as well, because I find this topic really interesting, is also about relationships. Do you believe that people can create or draw in the type of relationships that they want and keep them? Or do you think it's much more complex because you've got two people, two brains, etc., etc.? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I think relationships are is the hardest thing that people struggle with on many levels, because life is really all about relationships, isn't it? And I will urge people to do their work on themselves. Right now, if you're in a healthy, loving relationship, you can do the work on yourself as you're going through those relationships.
That's me. That's literally, my poor husband has had to deal with me doing that for the past 5 years.
That's a healthy relationship, right? As you're growing and changing, he's still there and you're having a great relationship, right? But I'm not a believer of like, you've got to love yourself before you step into a relationship. But I do think you have to learn about your patterns before you dive in. And again, it depends on sort of the levels of traumas and things you've had. Childhood plays a massive role of, the partners that we choose, because ultimately I'm a believer that we choose, our partners is either our mother or our father, and it's, we're trying to get the thing that we lacked from that parent through the person that we choose. And so we have to look at all of that stuff in quite deep level, some of us do, before you can have something super, super healthy. You've got to know about your boundaries, your value, your worth, things like that. And you've also got to be someone, I'm a believer of like, you have to learn to really love your life and know that you're whole anyway, and that having a partner is an added bonus, but it isn't everything. A lot of people get caught up in, I'm single, and if I had a partner, then I'd be happy. And that's a really dangerous way to live your life.
No one's going to fix you.
No one's coming to save you.
Yeah.
No one's coming to save you.
I think it's very...
The grass is always greener as well.
Absolutely.
But also I always say that like women have also been brought up with this toxic narrative about being saved, Disney, Sex and the City.
Yeah.
And I find it really dangerous.
Yeah.
I even said yesterday, like the biggest hoax of my generation was like Big coming to rescue Carrie in Sex and the City.
Gosh, those
Big
were the days.
doesn't...
Do you remember those days? Yeah.
Yeah, but no, Big doesn't change. First of all, he was married twice before. He gave you the bare minimum. And then you're saying he's coming to Paris to declare his undying love. And then, by the way, he also stands her up on the altar. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, no, but we still want the Big. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like there's also this toxic narrative around constantly pining over someone that gives you the bare minimum because they may change,
I think it's a very strange time out there with dating and things like that today. I think that men and women are they are literally like this, you know. I don't know if anyone can see that on a podcast, but like we're just on completely different levels today. And I think that, women decided to, burn their bras, and we wanted equality, and we thought, why not? I want to be in the boardroom too. And we've got to that point now, which is amazing. Thank you to the suffragettes. Thank you to all these women before us that got us to a point where we've got a voice. And I feel that, men are a bit stuck now of like, well, now what? What do we do? And men open doors for women, and women say, no, thank you, I can do that myself. So they're a bit confused. And yet women really want a man to be gentle and loving and kind and all the rest of it. And it's all like everything's everywhere, and it's like how something has to change, because we're in a space right now where I'm hearing more and more and more of people just saying, I'm just single and I'm staying that way. Like, I just can't do it anymore.
I had 3 women in my surgery over the last 3 months that have chosen to have IVF donor babies on their own.
No doubt at all.
No, don't even know donors. And I was like, that's interesting. All lucrative jobs, 40, 41 years old. Were like, he never came along, so I'm doing on my own.
I think women have, accidentally overtaken a lot of men today, and men have to learn about emotional intelligence, and yet no one's teaching them. So we're really, really stuck at the moment out there. It's an interesting space.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
You've worked with so many clients, as you've said, and what's the most common thought pattern that holds people back?
I'm not good enough.
Really?
Is that men as well?
Yeah.
I mean, is there a difference between men and women, or age groups, different patterns you see?
What I love about working with men is men are way more logical, right? They're very boom, boom, boom. Like, it's really clear when you work with a guy. And women are a lot more like, spaghetti. Like, then we go this way and then we go that way. So men are super, super logical. But often, they're very action orientated. And so I'm constantly saying to my men clients, like, it's not about the action, it's about the thinking, But they are a lot more, logical, action orientated. related, but that's quite interesting. And women, you know, we're a bit more complex, right? We're a bit more, yeah. Okay, no more laughing. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, we're a bit more complex.
You've also talked a lot about like self-awareness being a superpower. So thank you for saying that I'm self-aware, because I work
really is.
Because I was saying, but what's the kind of questions that people should be asking about the daily? Because you know what, the self-awareness piece for me was like, I got surrounded by so many people. I mean, I was in this echo chamber, still am, still trying to escape the echo chamber, if I'm honest, of a certain type of person in my life. And what I recognised, there was such little self-awareness. And I think particularly for those people that like being like in the limelight or like being the centre of attention, semi-narcissists, everything like that, they really fail to ask questions and like have accountability. And that really bothers me, you know, it really bothers me. Like even as I was telling you about the addict that I was friends with, you know, it was always everyone else's fault, you know, there was always, I don't mind people being imperfect. I don't mind people fucking up because we're all human. What it does mind me is the self-awareness and lack of accountability and the blame on everyone else when things go wrong. So what kind of daily questions do you think people should be asking
themselves?
Yeah.
Well, if you're dealing with a narcissist, they're not going to be asking themselves questions. Let's just leave it at that, right? Because that isn't going to happen. You're asking, you know, an apple to be an apple and an orange to be an orange. It's just not going to happen. So those people won't be asking themselves daily questions. But by the way, if you're saying, oh my God, am I a narcissist? I want you to know you're not, because you're asking yourself the question, okay? So your question you're asking me, I'm just double checking here, is like, what question should we ask ourselves to be self-aware?
To be better people, exactly.
To be better people, ultimately, is just, what am I thinking? That is like the best question you can ask yourself ever. What am I thinking? And is this thought helping me go in the direction of where I want to go? Or is this thought taking me into a completely different direction? What am I thinking? Right? That's a really important
Do you separate
point.
the different personas, like the, you know, like that chimp paradox kind of, you know, I feel like there's three of me.
Right.
Parts. He's talking about parts, essentially. You know,
there will be loads of different parts of you, you know, and we're all a work in
So when
progress.
you say, well, what am I thinking? Something. Which one of me? You know, it's like,
but still ask yourself the question, because you'll get some really great answers. You know, it's a really, really powerful question. What am I thinking? And it also gets you into the self-awareness section. And by the way, we can't just stop at self-awareness. Then we've actually got to do our work to change
do
things.
something about it.
Can't just sit there and be like, yay, you know.
So with dentistry, right? Lots of high achievers. Okay, so we've got, my partner describes it as, in finance, dentistry, medicine, like all these kind of corporate careers, they rely on insecure overachievers. And I was like, that is such a good way to describe so many dentists, because they rely on us, you know, being insecure and wanting to overachieve. And that's what kind of keeps us really driven and really dedicated to the job, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyways, there are lots of high achievers in dentistry, and there's this constant drive to do more and be better. But how do we balance ambition with self-acceptance?
Outer success doesn't make you happy. And, you know, there's this lovely Buddhist saying, which I know I'm going to get wrong, but it's basically about like, you know, you've got to buy the Ferrari to find your enlightenment, right? Like you've got to go there to understand that doesn't do it for you. So I would just say to you that you have to learn how to value yourself on who you are, not what you do. It takes work, but it's really, really important. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly seeking it from outside of yourself. And you know, you can get to the top rung of the ladder, but it just doesn't mean you're happy. So learning how to do that's really, really important.
And I think it's really sad because you said like the constant gratification on social media shows people otherwise. And I've even seen it with some of my friends that have huge profiles on social media. They chase one thing after the other to get more of the engagement, more of the like, and they don't even know they're consciously doing it, but I know that they do. I was listening, do you ever listen to Matthew Hussey?
Sometimes,
yes. I really like his work. And he was talking today on a podcast, because I listen to a lot of his stuff as well, about how some people would explain the type of person they're attracted to, but when you break it down, type is just based on your ego and insecurity. And he was like, I know it's a little bit controversial, but someone might say, but really what they're saying their type is someone that makes them feel validated on the outside, or makes them feel, so for example, you're like, if they're seen with this certain person and someone goes, lucky her, or if you're seen with a certain person of a certain status or stature, you know what I mean, people, you know, you might feel like, oh, I'm good enough, do you know what I mean? So like there's this massive validation with who we think we should be with, rather than actually breaking down who the person is and with whether they are good for us. And I thought, you know what, that's a really interesting point. And the danger is with social media in every aspect of their life. For example, if you've had an eating disorder and your weight naturally fluctuates, if you are looking skinnier and have a belief that I am better when I'm skinnier, and then people online are saying you look amazing when you're at your skinniest, it's just going to perpetuate that belief. Does that make sense? So sometimes it's really hard to know who you are and what makes you happy, because you're kind of seeking that external validation all the time. And you believe that makes you happy.
That's why you've got to do your work, because you know, and the further down that path you go of doing your own work, the less any of that stuff happens.
Yeah.
And you know what you are, and you know who you are, and you know that you're good enough, and you know, and it's all okay.
So would you say you're invincible?
Invincible? I don't think I'm invincible. No, I mean, what is invincible?
What are you chasing? What are you chasing? I mean, it's an interesting question, right? That anything that happens in your life, that you've got to measure it against. Does this bring me more? Like, if peace is
well, for me, it was all about that, right? I
Yeah.
just wanted to have a mind that was quiet.
Yeah.
Like, that was all I ever wanted, because I had like a really loud mind and a destructive mind and a confused mind and a hurting mind. And so for me, it was always about, how can I be somebody who is completely at peace? And, you know, I feel blessed today that I could tell you that I have a life where I lead, which is deeply peaceful inside. And I think that has been, you know, worth it on every level.
But do you have to unpack it for your clients sometimes? Because I thought that I'm chasing happiness.
You did your whole life?
I thought I'm chasing happiness. Yeah. But actually, I was
What is
confusing.
that?
Yeah. What is that exactly?
I was confusing happiness with pleasure.
Right.
Yeah. Joy. Yeah. They're kind of very different, those things.
Dopamine hits.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm thinking contentment, which is a totally different thing to happiness and joy and pleasure.
Also growing up.
Yeah.
Right. I think age is a big part of that, you know.
Yeah. No, but unpacking those things, you know, like, because you think you're chasing happiness, but actually you're chasing pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like, so you think it's a good thing to do. It's a worthy cause. Yeah?
It's what makes you feel good inside, right? Like, you know, ultimately, if you're drinking loads, you aren't feeling good. You think you are, but you know that you're not.
But that's the thing, people mistake dopamine for happiness, and they don't realise that it's a high. And we're constantly chasing highs because things are so accessible to us. We're constantly chasing the partner that's better, the job, the fame, the looks, whatever. And the thing is that we've also, like, the compare and despair space is becoming more and more vast, because let's face it, of course there's going to be someone that's better looking, more successful, this, like any of us, like, you know, if we compare, you know. And I think that is dangerous, because people don't get celebrated, like you said, enough for their authenticity and vulnerability. And it's sad, because sometimes I really see us taking steps back, you know. When I see comments on Facebook and Instagram, not from me, but like on other people's posts, I'm like, things haven't changed, or like not enough people are doing the work, you know.
Well, I think that's it. I think not enough people are doing the work, and I think that's really, really important, you know, because
but more are doing the work now than ever before, right?
Are they?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it used to be
we're in a microcosm. I
don't know.
It used to be a dirty thing to even see a shrink or see a therapist.
Yeah, he's saying the mental health.
As in mental health. I mean, look, when I started, I remember saying to people, I'm a life coach. And my dad at the time was like, what? Who's going to knock on your door? What?
Yeah.
Right? He was so baffled by it. And I remember writing to all the public schools, like all of them, saying, hi, I'm a life coach. I'd like to come and give a talk to the boys so that I can talk to them about their emotions and what they're thinking. And every one of these public schools wrote back to me and said, we've got a nurse on site.
Oh my God, it's hilarious.
And look how far we've come.
Yeah,
right?
so we've come a long way.
But have we come too far the other way now, is the question. Is everything about mental health? And
There's
oh my
a lot
God,
of it.
I can't get out of bed because
This
I'm having a
podcast
day of
exists for-
anxiety.
But like you said, I think you said, like you quite rightly said, like victim mentality is the thing that really irks you. And I think it irks me too, because I'm like, you have risk from me.
I mean, I'm not, listen, I know I'm very tough, but I do believe in feeling your feelings, right? Like, I'm a real believer of, like, you know, you
Sitting
break
with
up with your
emotions.
boyfriend, fucking sit down and eat a tub of ice cream and cry for 3 weeks. Like, you've got to have the feelings. And when you're ready, then you make the change.
Yeah.
So that's really important, you know. But the victim mentality thing, because
Blaming everyone else, blaming your life.
And not owning your part in these things. It's really important.
You know what, though? You know, like you said, when you see a family of 4 all on their phones, and you said about comparing yourself, and obviously social media, you end up comparing more. Yeah, it's true. But do you both recognise that there was always those things? I mean, whether or not they were on the phone, maybe that same family before would be sitting not talking to each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or
absolutely.
comparison wise, it's not every morning, every time you flick your phone, but maybe back then you used to turn up at a wedding and your clothes weren't the same as comparison has always existed.
Yeah, of course. But I think that there's sometimes like a break from it, like for example, even if you want to dissociate from somebody toxic in your life, like back in the day, if I fell out with someone in my teenagehood or my 20s, I'm like, cool, they're not in my life and I don't have access to anything they're doing or what they're doing, and that's a decision. Now this happens, like you might be tempted like every now and then just to be like, what are they up to? Like you break up with someone, are they dating someone new? Do you know what I mean? Like you've just got all of this access that I just doesn't think help that whole self-preservation thing. And that's just my view, because you've got the temptations there, and being human, sure, I don't put myself to constantly looking, but every now and then I might slip and be like, what's this person doing and stuff. And I think the accessibility to these different things makes it more difficult, I think.
Like the narcissist life coach, that guy.
No, I actually laugh. I looked at his LinkedIn the other day and I was like, anyone that pays this chump, I feel sorry for him, It
happens.
So I want to ask you something, because I think this is really important. If you could go back and have a conversation with your younger self at her lowest point, what would you tell her?
I would say to her, it's going to get better than you could ever imagine. And I do really believe that the extremes that I went through in my life, extremes, was for a reason, and that all of that. And I realized that as I got into coaching and started my business, I was like, now I get it. Like now I get why that path was so tough. And, I'm grateful for it.
Do you really believe that paths are written out for us?
I have a feeling that, we probably choose what we want before we get here. We probably say, this is what I want to learn, having this human experience. It's possible.
Do you believe it?
No.
What do you believe?
I've come round to the notion of life will keep teaching you the lessons until you learn them. That idea. But any sort of supernatural kind of angle on it just puts me off straight away.
Some people just don't.
But you do, you do keep on making the same mistakes again and again and again until you learn not to make those mistakes anymore.
Do you think that's happened to you?
Yeah, life has a way of grinding you into that situation.
Some people never learn; they just keep doing it.
But that's why I think that the thing that terrifies me the most in the entire world is the deathbed regrets. The one that was written.
Never wants to have a deathbed regret.
But the thing is, you see, the nurse that wrote the book, so she wrote a book and she wrote like the most common regrets. And for me, it's really reflective of the 9-to-5 person that lived the cookie cutter life that thought would make them happy. And when you see the regrets, it's basically like not taking enough risks, not spending enough time with your family and friends, like all this stuff.
The biggest one was living for other
people's
expectations.
What a terrible way to live your life.
But
to me,
the most common regret on a deathbed.
Do you find a lot of your clients experience that?
I think they care what other people think.
Yeah,
definitely. It's a big thing about what other people think about them, and they don't want to disappoint people, women especially, big people pleasing, all of this stuff. You got to unpack it. Right, you don't have to live like that. That's so important. Yeah, it's common.
So do you say now that you live by your own rules?
My friends would laugh at you saying that, because like I am the personification, if that's the right word, of that. Like I'm very empathetic and I'm kind, but I also live a life that I'm comfortable with, and you all can do what you want with that.
Yeah. What does success actually mean to you now?
Peace. I think it's all about being peace within myself, and that to me is the biggest, and most successful thing ever. I think when I can put my head down at night and have total peace. I feel really grateful for that. Yeah, I've worked hard for it.
And you deserve it, because you're amazing. And I want to ask you lastly as well, what is the future? What does the future hold? What can we be excited about in Jacqueline's world?
Do you know what? I have to tell you, when my dad passed away last year in August, it was a life-changing event for me. And if I always have been a life grabber and a life lover, but watching somebody you love, especially a parent, pass like that, it gives you a whole new perspective on what you want to do with your life. For me, there's lots of things that I think about doing. It's the second book for sure. We talked about that just as I sat down. I think that's, I've got to get around to doing that. That's really important. And to have, to spend, which is what I do, real quality time with the people I love. That makes me happy. I took my mum for a walk yesterday after this operation she's had, and her eyes are quite blurry. And so she had to hold my arm, blah, blah, blah. And we stopped and we looked at these beautiful flowers in one of the garden squares. And I was laughing. And I said, so this is what they mean when they say stop and smell the roses. So to me, that stuff's really important, which is quality time and being present with the people that I love.
Yeah. And I think there's something so profound. I'm so close to my parents, especially my dad. There's something so profound about watching your parents age. There's this sense of vulnerability, and sometimes my dad's almost 80, and it's so precious to spend these moments. It really, really is. Yeah, so important.
So important, because you never ever want to say, I wish I had. I was really lucky. I got 1 month with my dad. I was with him at the hospital 24/7. I didn't leave his side, and I got to tell him everything I wanted to say, and I know that he got to do the same for me. And that is one of the greatest gifts out of this, awful experience that we're all going to go through. It was one of the greatest gifts that I got to have that opportunity to have, spent that time with him. Yeah. So spend time with people you love, be present. It's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I love that so much. And if people want to find you, Jacqueline, can you just tell us your handles?
Okay, so my website's jacquelinehurst.com. My Instagram is Jacqueline_Hurst_. My school is thelifeclass.com, and the book is called How to Do You, which is available on Amazon and iTunes and all of those things.
Jacqueline, quickly before we wrap up, the question of how to do you.
Yes.
Specifically you.
Yeah.
What are some tips to say, how do I unpack me? The real me,
okay,
rather than the sort of layers of things that we build on top?
So I think meditation is a really powerful tool to sit down and get to know yourself a little bit better and learn how to quieten your mind. Being really conscious and aware of what you're thinking, really important. And how are you living your life? Ask yourself that question, am I living a life to keep other people happy, or am I being true and authentic to myself? Living authentically, being true to yourself is a really beautiful way to live, and unpacking that is really, really important.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.